Hello, Archie Dunlop here with Talking Astrology with Archie on Thursday, August the 24th, 2023. Today, as usual, I'm going to look at what's going on astrologically today on Thursday, August the 24th, 2023. But I also want to cover two topics fairly briefly. The first topic is Lucy Letby, the nurse who was convicted of killing 7 babies. I covered her yesterday, but I felt that I didn't cover her in great detail. One of my commenters, was talking about Chiron, and I know how I never use Chiron. And it's true, I haven't talked about Chiron at all in any of the videos I put up since February. I have problems with Chiron, but in Lucy Letby's case, Chiron may be something we need to think about. So I want to look at her horoscope again, look at some things I hadn't mentioned, and yes, I did want to mention her Chiron. The other thing I want to talk about is my favourite subject is Ukraine, because it's Ukraine's birthday today. Happy birthday, Ukraine. Born on August the 24th. So I want to have a quick look at the Ukraine chart. Specifically, I want to look at its solar return. Anyway, before I do all that, I want to look at the positions of the planets today. Sorry, there's Lucy Letby again, top right. Didn't know what else to put up there. I know you saw her yesterday in one of the videos I put up yesterday. So anyway, let's see what is going on today. The moon is in Sagittarius. Now, on the surface, that might seem like good news because, the moon has been in Scorpio. The moon doesn't work very well in Scorpio. The moon is in it's fallen in Scorpio. All those sort of blocked emotions, anger, resentment, brooding. Oh, sorry to be negative about Moon in Scorpio. Moon in Scorpio can be very sensitive. It's a very emotional sign. It can often be very in tune with what's going on around it. And it's, 1 in 12 people have Moon in Scorpio. So when the moon goes into Sagittarius, as you can see, moon is in Sagittarius, it straight away makes a square to the Sun in Virgo, and it makes a square to Saturn. So moon is hitting a square to Saturn. Moon is on the Sun-Saturn midpoint. And that kind of indicates a situation where, we feel ready to go. Moon's gone into Sagittarius. We've got all these plans, but then we hit Saturn and, Saturn in Pisces. So we might immediately run up against roadblocks. All our big ideas, it just might be a lot more complicated than expected. We might think we've got away from all those emotional complications, but, Saturn's in Pisces. So we might have to be dealing with another set of emotions, people blocking us. Okay, it might not seem like they're blocking us for emotional reasons, but, people are emotional animals. So if someone is coming up with rational reasons why we shouldn't do something, dig a bit deeper, because I don't think those reasons are particularly rational. You're dealing with people with deep-seated emotions who, for one reason or another, are getting in our way. And I'm not convinced it's a situation where we can do much. I mean, we have to work with it. I don't think it's a time where we can really be a battering ram. I just don't think that's going to work. So I think we have to be careful there. It could be difficult to make progress. If we want to make progress, it's going to require hard work and sensitivity. But it's not all bad. If Mercury if you look at Mercury, Mercury is at 21 Virgo. So if you look at Jupiter and Pluto, is there a grand trine? Well, it would be a very wide grand trine, wouldn't it? Mercury is 6 degrees off the trine of Jupiter. It's 7 degrees off the trine of Pluto. That's a very wide difference between it's not exactly exact, but Mercury is actually on the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint. So because Mercury is on the Jupiter-Pluto midpoint, I think we can regard today as really having an operational Mercury-Jupiter-Pluto grand trine in Earth signs. So I know I've just talked about all of the sort of blocks and resistance that we might be feeling today. But Mercury's in Virgo. Mercury is a very intelligent Mercury. If we can use our brains, Jupiter-Pluto is, as a pair, Jupiter-Pluto is all about, Jupiter-Pluto is about having a great desire to be successful, to really want to push ourselves. We're not satisfied with the way things are, and Mercury on the Jupiter-Pluto wants to communicate that. To give you an idea, I'm just going to see what Reinhold Ebertin in Combination of Stellar Influences says about Mercury on a Jupiter-Pluto. He says, the gift of oration, the desire to influence many people, a propaganda campaign. So any chance of doing that? We're going to need to communicate. We can communicate if we're clever, if we get past that Moon-Saturn square. So we can be very convincing. So it depends on the situation. But if you have an opportunity to influence, if you have an opportunity to use a bit of oratory, if you have an opportunity to propagandize. I don't know whether it's a good or a bad thing. Propaganda has a bad reputation. We're surrounded by propaganda, and so if you want to be a propagandist, you might be just causing more problems for all of us. But I think the opportunity is certainly there if you're clever enough. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say about today's planets, aside from, of course, my forecast for the 12 signs. So here are my forecasts for the 12 signs, and it is Thursday, August the 24th, 2023. Aries. You can feel a change of pace, the world becoming less intense, and there being opportunities to reach out beyond your immediate environment. However, things aren't quite as simple as they should be, and in order to achieve your goals, you may have to confront a major obstacle. Use intelligence rather than force. Taurus. You make a simple suggestion, and the response isn't what you were expecting. There mightn't be much enthusiasm, there might even be some criticism. You may feel disheartened, but you perhaps need to fall back on your own devices. You can then judge yourself rather than be judged by other people. Gemini. It's a time when relationships can prosper, when you can strengthen the ties to the people closest to you. Though it's not entirely straightforward. You seem preoccupied, perhaps by work and career, so you may not be able to give people the attention they deserve. Also, if anyone is interested in you, you might not notice. Cancer. There is stuff that needs doing. It may not be very interesting, but it nonetheless can't be avoided, though it is important not to exhaust yourself. Concentrate on the things that matter and don't allow yourself to be distracted. And bear in mind that in close relationships, there might be a difference of opinion. Leo, it's a day when you want to show off your talents and you'll expect a fair amount of praise. However, you can't expect everything to go your way, and your creative output may not be quite as good as you had expected, unless you're prepared to devote a huge amount of time and energy to the project at hand. Virgo, you want to stay put and you don't seem to be in the mood for too much excitement, but even then you're feeling uneasy. So it is probably a day when you shouldn't feel obliged to do anything, and instead you should mellow out in your own space. Partners are a blessing or a curse, depending on the situation. Libra, there are things you want to communicate, and at the same time you might be in the mood for some short distance travelling. However, the moon is making a stressful aspect to Saturn, so getting your message across may be harder than expected. You'll have to choose your words very carefully. Scorpio, it's a time for considering what you have and don't have. While not everyone should be judged on their possessions, in fact, no one should be judged on their possessions, particularly in the final analysis. When we reach the pearly gates, it doesn't matter what we have, does it? But nonetheless, ownership and resources in the here and now can't be ignored. And if you feel that you don't have enough, then you have to consider how best to deal with the deficit. The solution is closer than you think. Sagittarius, the moon is now in your star sign, which is good news. You can be yourself without having to apologize. Yet, the moon is making an aspect to Saturn. This means that you won't have as much freedom as you'd like, and ties from the past may restrict your freedom in the present and near future. Possibly not what you wanted to hear, but the past really is important. Capricorn, just because someone is being stupid or unwise doesn't mean that you have to tell them. If it is not a critical situation, then you can probably keep quiet and let the other person live and learn. And if you're in a relationship, you have to make a special effort to be tolerant, because you don't want to close people down with the power of your personality. Aquarius, do you do it now or later? Your first impulse is to get everything out of the way as quickly as possible, but that might not be the right strategy, with the moon making a stressful aspect to Saturn. Attempts to expend too much energy too quickly could end with a standstill situation. Put another way, take it easy. Pisces, today I'm being pretty negative for most of the signs, but I think Pisceans are actually in quite a strong position. The moon is in a high-profile sector of your solar chart, and it's square with Saturn in Pisces, and this gives you strength and determination. So if you're ambitious and you focus on one goal, you can get good results. So what I'm going to do now, as usual, is look at the I Ching. So as always, I threw 3 coins in the air. I asked the question, what is Thursday going to be like for visitors to my YouTube channel? And the first hexagram I got was number 7, the army. The army is about people gathering around a leader with the aim of achieving a particular goal. So there's an indication here that maybe on our own we can't achieve much, but perhaps with other people we're going to be more successful. And because it's the army, there's an indication that there is an opponent out there. So we have to work out how do we deal with the opponent. Now, no one's looking at my YouTube channel, I assume, who's actually in a war zone. So I don't think we can take this literally. And it's just a one-day forecast, so we have to kind of bring it down to ordinary life. So in the first instance, what do we do? I think we in the first instance, the opposition is probably a bit too strong for us, and that kind of makes sense in terms of the astrology, because I said that there is Moon square Saturn. Although the I Ching and the astrology, I do them independently. I mean, they're not. I don't have the intention to combine them, but sometimes they chime with each other. So I think if we're dealing with an obstacle, particularly if it's like an enemy, not just an obstacle, a passive rock, someone who actually is our enemy, if there's any sort of rivalries, I think in the first instance we need to retreat. We're not really strong enough. The I Ching is certainly suggesting that. But later, as the day progresses, when we kind of look at the problem in another way, we may actually see that there is actually a chance to vigorously take on the enemy, take on the rival, take action. And the I Ching is advising us, yes, to do it in a kind of strong, determined way, but we mustn't go over the top. If we put in too much energy into defeating our rivals, the whole thing could backfire, and we could lose the advantage. But all of this is going to be quite exhausting, isn't it? And that moves us to the second hexagram, which it moves to, which is oppression. Which in the Wilhelm translation of the I Ching, it actually says 38. It says oppression, and then in parenthesis it says exhaustion. So we could. It's all going to be quite exhausting. As a sort of this is the image of the lake at the top, the abyss, all the water flowing out of the lake. So. Our efforts to get the better of our rivals, our enemies, and don't forget, it could be our enemies. What do they call it? The internal psychomachia. What is that? That's like the battle within ourselves. Didn't the Crusaders have this internal psychomachia, the battle within ourselves? Maybe when I was talking about Seven, the army, it's our own struggle with ourselves to discipline ourselves, to get us ready to be to live better lives. Maybe some of us, it may just be an internal psychomachia. It just may be that inner battle. But whatever it is, whether we're fighting real something outside, within us, by the end of the day, I think it's all quite exhausting, and we just haven't got much energy to do anything. Also. Don't forget there's a Moon Saturn square. So I think that's how it ends. So when you realize that you've done enough, when you have no more energy, just call it a day. So now I want to go back to the astrology, go back to some charts, and I want to revisit the horoscope of Lucy Letby. That's her natal chart that I looked at. Yesterday. I've tried to find out some information about her personality. It's not a great deal going on. I think that she was hardworking at school. She was hardworking. She I think wanted to look after, apparently she wanted to look after, premature babies, right from the beginning. As a child, that's what she wanted to do. She was an only child. She felt great responsibility, I think, or pressure perhaps from her parents, and they weren't very happy when she left home and went to university and stayed away from them. They weren't, so I mean, being an only child, that's hardly anything anything particularly pathological about being an only child. Hardly anything pathological about having feeling great responsibilities for one's parents. So of course we don't know what was going on in her family, in the family unit. Now there is an aspect, a semi-sextile aspect. I just noticed that she's got Mars semi-sextile Neptune. So when you see semi-sextiles in a chart, some sort of old books on astrology used to or some books actually, they regard a semi-sextile as being a good aspect. I would disagree. I don't think semi-sextiles are good aspects. I think they're actually bad aspects, along with quincunxes. Because you've got Mars in Sagittarius, which is all about, certainly expressing yourself freely, and it's semi-sextile Neptune. So that's about sort of the confused expression of confused expression of her of her energy, her assertion, the way she asserts herself. It's kind of like a Mars Neptune. I've talked about Mars Neptune squares being putting energy into the sort of the underside of things, into sleaze, whatever, drugs. Because I don't think she took drugs, but she obviously did a lot of work with drugs and was misusing drugs to kill the babies she was, in some cases, she was supposed to be looking after. So we do have that Mars semi-sextile Neptune, which is not, which I don't think is particularly helpful. And then there's Chiron. Chiron here. I've never put up a Chiron in any chart I've put up before. So Chiron is an absolutely minuscule body, which was discovered in 1977, and some astrologers went absolutely crazy about Chiron in the 80s when I started learning astrology. Chiron was, I don't know. I mean, it was, I think, given too much energy, too much emphasis was given into Chiron, and it was, it almost seemed that Chiron was being, you saw books on Chiron, you saw people's workshops on Chiron, you pay to go to a workshop on Chiron. So for some people, Chiron was actually a way of making money in the 80s. I remember, I think someone even suggested that Chiron might be a ruler of Sagittarius, which is of course nonsense. But so I have a certain aversion to Chiron. Nonetheless, I cannot deny that she has Chiron opposition the Sun. So what does that mean? Because astrologers, they sometimes say, oh yeah, Chiron is opposition this, whatever, but that's just could be coincidence. So what? It doesn't mean anything unless the symbolism really fits, and then you have to ask, what is the symbolism? Because there's a danger, I think, that Chiron becomes a hanger for whatever you want to put onto it. So in mythology, Chiron was a centaur, and I believe he was wounded by an arrow, which I think had the Hydra's poison on it, and it was a terrible poison, causing incredible agony. But because he was Chiron, a centaur, he was immortal, so he could never recover. He could never get out of this. Never get out of this situation. He was poisoned. He was kind of dying, but could never die. That kind of thing. Chiron is often associated with a wound. So if you want to talk about Chiron, you need to focus on a symbolism. Wounds, the wounded healer. Often say the wounded healer. Now, here is a woman that set herself up as a healer. She set herself up as a nurse. So that's a healer. So that's kind of Sun opposition Saturn. You could say, well, logically, that is a struggle to be a healer. And, that's what she wanted to do. She studied nursing at university, became a nurse. Yeah, that would fit Sun opposition Chiron really nicely. Bit of a struggle, but what is the problem? And how does that relate to the poison? So I also said, now I'm coming back to Chiron. I also mentioned the fact that she is, she's Sun in Capricorn, but she's got Moon in Aries, and so I take the view that in a female chart, the woman grows into her moon. In a man's chart, he grows into his sun. And so I would have said that as she grew older, past 21, she'd become less of a Capricorn, more of an Aries. So you can see her Capricorn. She studied hard. She was very conscientious, apparently. Her parents were very proud of her. I read that when she at 16 or at certain ages they put some advertisement in a newspaper talking about her achievements. So her parents were really proud of her, and that's her. That's the hardworking girl. Parents very proud of her. But it's a Sun in Capricorn. That's when she hits 21, 22, that Capricorn is going to lose some of its strength, and you're going to start to move into the Moon in Aries. So Moon in Aries is going to be more impulsive. She's gonna want to do her own thing. When she went away to university, she didn't want to come back home. I think I read somewhere that's what her parents expected, but she didn't do that. Moon in Aries, sort of independent, being independent-minded. So, okay, that's good. But maybe what happened here was that she puts all this energy into wanting to be a I suppose a pediatric nurse looking after premature babies, and that's what she wanted to do. Then maybe she hits her she leaves university, and then maybe she just realizes actually she doesn't want to do that. That's my theory. I mean that's a very simple thing, and lots of people have that. It's not a big deal, but it seems to perhaps link into this Chiron. What is this poison that she can't get out of? It's almost like maybe she feels that she has to look after newborn babies, premature babies, but she doesn't want to do it. She's doing something maybe she doesn't want to do, and I think that we might see in this chart a T-square. So a T-square, we do not know her time of birth, so we don't know exactly where the moon is. But let's say the moon is at 14 Aries. We can see a T-square involving, there's a Sun-Chiron opposition. Sort of wanting to heal, but perhaps realizing she maybe doesn't want to heal, doesn't want to do what she's doing. So it's a struggle. And then the moon perhaps represents the solution. And so it's that sudden assertiveness. Somehow she decides to resolve this issue. She can't get out of this job. So at an unconscious level. And rather than looking after babies, she switches to wanting to kill them. And maybe that's how she how she dealt with this problem. Now that might sound extraordinary. For ordinary, normally, if you don't want to do a job, you just leave the job or you retrain or whatever. But she stays in the job. I mean, this is my theory. I'm just trying to work it out. Perhaps when you might have some other ideas about what it means to have Moon on this with Chiron, Sun Chiron opposition. Well, of course, it's not just a Sun Chiron opposition. It's a Saturn Chiron opposition. It's a Neptune Chiron opposition. So it's this struggle. It's this struggle to heal. Was it healing herself? The wounded healer. So we have a healer who is incredibly wounded. She must have been wounded to have killed 7 babies. So the healer. So you've got this contract. The healer is so wounded that the healer wounds the people she's looking after. And the moon is this resolution. The moon is a resolution by actually taking action to get rid of the babies she's healing, or to kill some of them. Maybe the intention was somehow to show that she is in the wrong job. I mean, I know that sounds very trivial, but that's just a thought on it. One other thing I should say, that as far as when this is a chart of her first when she started killing. I mean, I've just read a newspaper article. So it happened on June the 8th, and she went on duty on a night shift at 7:30 p.m. So I believe this is the horoscope for the beginning of her night shift. So you can see, there's the sun in the 7th house. I'm not saying there's anything particularly dramatic about that. I suppose it's worth noting that you've got a moon conjunct Neptune at the beginning of her night shift. That would kind of indicate a situation where someone is about to. I'm not quite sure how the first baby. I think it was with some drug, some injection, or whether it was air or insulin, or I'm not quite sure what she did. But the moon is applying to a conjunction of Neptune at the beginning of the night shift. I believe the first baby died at 9 o'clock, an hour and a half, just around an hour and a half after the night shift began. So you can, if we look at that, if we quickly change that chart to make it to 9 o'clock, I think it was just before 9 o'clock. So there you see the sun had, but as the sun, that's well, yeah, I think that's a chart, I believe, of the first death. So there's that. As far as why June the 8th, what happened was, as I said before, her solar return set for June the 4th, 2015. I've already looked at that chart. That kind of indicated this was the year that it was going to happen. Then we had a full moon. We had a full moon. So this was the full moon on June the 2nd, 2015. Just before. So how did that full moon affect her? Well, this full moon was at 11:49 Gemini. 11:49 Sagittarius. So let's now look at her chart. She had the Mars. Well, at noon when she was born, Mars was at 12. Was at 12 Sagittarius. So that full moon was on her Mars. So the full moon was, that's what seems to have triggered it. That Mars, you can have all these fantasies and ideas, but Mars is when you actually go and do it. And remember what I said, Mars is semi-sextile, Mars is semi-sextile Neptune. So I think that was probably it. She, Mars, Neptune, she started killing babies, and she, with drugs, injections. That's Mars semi-sextile Neptune. So that kind of makes sense. As far as the transits are concerned, it does seem to be that Pluto played a big role here. So Pluto at the time of the first murder was at 1455 Capricorn. So looking at her natal chart, Pluto, she's so for the last sort of year or so or more, she'd had Pluto conjunct her Sun. So who knows what she was actually experiencing? Pluto was obviously not just conjunct her Sun; it was opposition her Chiron. So that all that Sun-Chiron opposition was being stirred up. Then Pluto had moved a little bit away from the Sun, but it was now on the Sun-Saturn midpoint. So that suggests to me a woman that for some reason felt really frustrated. Something had to give. And then Pluto on the Sun-Saturn midpoint, that's when she did it. And remember, she's got her Sun is conjunct Neptune. The confusion, Neptune, planet of drugs. But given how problematic the Sun is. I said in the female chart that, you should, at 21, 22, that she should move from her Sun to her Moon. The Moon should have been her primary way of operating. I think if she'd been able to move fully into the Moon and really become that Moon in Aries and left behind that Sun in Capricorn, maybe she wouldn't have done what she did. One final thing before I move on is I want to look at her secondary progressions. This is when I move one day. First day after she's born is the first year. Second day is the second year. So, what was actually going on from a secondary progressed point of view. Now, remember I said that there was a full moon on her Mars, and if we look at her progressed Mars, set this for January the 29th, was sort of around 25 days after she was born, which would correspond to her 25th year. We can see that Mars is opposition, starting to move. It's gone into Capricorn. Mars is it's suddenly changed sign. It's moved onto its Capricorn square, the Aries point, and it is opposition Jupiter. So Mars Jupiter opposition. I think it was Charles Carter said, the English astrologer Charles Carter said that Mars Jupiter opposition is potentially the worst aspect in the book. And there's the Mars Jupiter starting to form by progression, and so Mars Jupiter has many manifestations. But in her case, she's putting all that energy into causing destruction, into murder and killing these seven babies. So now let's move on and let's look at the horoscope of Ukraine. I'm not going to spend long on Ukraine. I'm just going to look at 2 solar returns. So this is the chart for the independence of Ukraine, August the 24th, 1991. I've gone for 5:31 p.m. There is a view that it's actually 6 p.m. So it's somewhere very late afternoon. You can see the Sun is in Virgo. As I've said, Saturn is going retrograde now. Saturn goes stationary direct at around 0 Virgo early November. That, to my mind, does not look good for Ukraine. Now, as far as the solar return is concerned, we set a chart for when the sun returns to where it was at birth. Now, I want to look at an old solar return for Ukraine. This is the solar return for its Independence Day on 2013. So this would cover the period from August 2013 to August 2014. This is a time when you had, at the beginning of 2014, you had massive interference in Ukraine's internal affairs. You had when the US and particularly Victoria Nuland was encouraging the Maidan revolt, where the elected president in Ukraine was basically pushed out, and you got a pro-American regime coming in, and so I think this chart it's kind of it's a bit misleading, not misleading, but you might get fooled by that Jupiter, because it looks a really good chart because you've got Jupiter in Cancer on the ascendant. So you might say, oh well, this is going to be a great year for Ukraine. So for some Ukrainians, it certainly was a great year. You were, if you were a Ukrainian nationalist, you hated Russia, this was great because it started off great. Okay, you did lose Crimea, you did have a civil war in the East, but maybe you felt that this was a time when you were asserting your independence. Of course, that Jupiter in Cancer is conjunct conjunct America's Sun. So let's just look at the USA chart here quick. That's a chart for USA, July the 4th, 1776. You can see the Sun is at 1319 Cancer. So Ukraine Jupiter's at 1233 Cancer. So I think that Jupiter in Cancer very much suggests American influence. But it seems to be for many Ukrainians a good thing in spite of the absolute carnage that this event caused, particularly in eastern Ukraine and Donbass. You can, if you're into whole sign, particularly if you're into whole sign houses, you can see that this solar return has Uranus square the ascendant, Moon Uranus conjunction. That really does suggest some kind of revolution. Whole signs that Uranus would be in the beginning of the 10th house cusp. Although it's in the 11th house from a whole sign perspective, this Moon Uranus conjunction really has a very 10th house feel, and the 10th house in astrology is government, change of government. So what I'm saying is that solar return fits very well. There's also a warning here because Pluto is lurking on the descendant. I suppose you could say that's Russia. That's Russian influence. You haven't got away from Russia. Don't think you have. So that Pluto is there. It's not going away. Don't be, it's like Ukraine was kind of denying that Pluto. Pluto, I suppose, can be the past. Ukraine is in perhaps denial of that Pluto, of those supporting the revolution, the putsch, however you want to describe it, even people like Victoria Nuland. It's there. Pluto is going to fester away, and it's going to manifest at some stage. So that solar return for 2013, I think, really fits what happened in 2014. You also look, you've got Venus. Maybe that's Victoria Nuland lurking, Moon opposition Venus. Well, she wasn't lurking, was she? She was, by the beginning of 2014, she was there. So now let's move and look at the solar return for today. It's not as dramatic. I mean, that is a really dramatic solar return. I mean, that really shows that solar returns work for nation states. So the solar return for today, South Node on the ascendant isn't great. The moon is in Sagittarius. South Node, it's reputation. South Node can be about reputation. I think that's a suggestion that, Ukraine is wearing a bit thin. Its reputation is wearing a bit thin. Maybe people are just getting sick of Ukraine. Maybe Zelensky is not having the impact he used to have. But, I wouldn't put great store into that in a solar return. But the sun, the moon is square the sun. Now, what is the moon? Now, the moon in astrology can actually be the people. I think the people may be, we may be getting a bit sick of it. I'm not saying we're talking about a revolution or anything, but that's the Ukrainian people probably at odds with the government increasingly, because the ruler of the 10th house, using Placidus' house system, the house Placidus house system, is the sun. There's Sun in Virgo. That's the government, and the moon is square the sun, and so the moon, having made that square to the sun, makes a square to Saturn. So, you can see the sun is making it's moving towards the opposition of Saturn, and Saturn is now, of course, is retrograde, moving back towards the sun. Beginning of November, Saturn goes stationary direct at 0 degrees Virgo. So the moon is square Saturn. So overall, I do not think that is a good solar return. I don't think that solar return on its own indicates that it's going to be a great year for Ukraine. The moon is moving to a square of Saturn, and this might indicate that as the year progresses, as we probably, if we say a degree for a year, a degree for a month maybe, so for 4 degrees time, maybe 4 months time, so it's now October, so that would be September, October, November, maybe December, whatever, by the end of the year, things are going to be looking even worse than they do look now. So if you're looking for a sort of a big change, for everything to suddenly work out for Ukraine on the battlefield and everything else, I don't think that the solar return for Ukraine provides you with much comfort. Anyway, that's all I'm going to say for today. And I will talk to you tomorrow.